And, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start.
We could.
This is the Planning Commission work session for September 16th, 2025. And we have in attendance Lauren Dickinson on the Zoom. We've got Craig Hogan and Jolene Goslin and myself, Mary Abbey, co-chair of the Planning Commission. Okay. I'd like to start with Catherine for a couple of moments on the information about public involvement. We're going to be having the Cascadia group come and do the presentation on the 30th on ADUs and the work that they've been doing. And I think it's really important that we start looking at how we can interact with the public and make sure that we're covering the bases that they're also covering, but also making sure that we've got a little extra information added on from our group so that we look like we know what we're doing. Pardon?
We need to reassure people.
We need to reassure people, exactly.
And that's kind of what I want to talk about for a minute. So it's September 30th.
At what time?
Some horrible.
5:30 to 7.
5 to 7?
5:30
5:30 to 7.
5:30 to 7
And
at the Commons.
at the Commons.
Yes.
Correct.
Are we gonna have a formal role as a commission at that meeting?
not really. I mean, it's nice if you can be there because there's some things that'll come up, and following the meeting, I think you guys are kind of gonna get bombarded with some public opinion, pro and con, but that's useful.
Because it will be live public commentary.
Yeah, so Cascadia tends to do a pretty structured presentation, but then they'll leave a lot of time for questions and answers. And since the planning commission and the council have both had a chance to kind of interact with them, this is more for the public who maybe hasn't been paying attention. My anticipation is that we may see more people opposed to the idea just because that tends to be who shows up, or the people who.
I can imagine the useful thing would be for somebody on the commission that maybe towards the end of that, basically say, we're not gonna do everything Cascadia is recommending.
And I think they'll hit on that. One of the things I want them to stress, because there was, an article in the newspaper that sort of said it's a done deal, and it's not.
That worried me.
Yeah, I worried about that too, and a lot of people came up and talked to me, so I finally had to read the article. But the tone of it sort of said, now we've started this ball rolling and we're gonna do it.
We could do all this.
And what we started is the public input portion of this.
Yeah.
And that's what you guys can help make people understand, that there'll be a lot more opportunities for public input. For any of you who suffered through our last code amendments, none of this happens quickly. Even if Cascadia hands us some recommended language, we're still gonna have multiple public hearings. So there'll be a lot of opportunities for oral and written testimony. And I'm anticipating some kind of lengthy meetings because we do want to give everybody a chance to talk. And if people just get up and yell and scream and say, I hate it because I hate it, maybe that's not useful input, but they still get their 3 minutes. But I guess what I want to stress, it's really different than the quasi judicial hearings that we've done so far. So up until now, if we're hearing a case for a particular property that affects one person, you guys are kind of all, no ex parte contact, no talking about it in the post office. Well, this is a whole different game. You're encouraged to engage. It's part of your job. So to have your elevator speech down.
But there should be somebody, okay, so Cascadia is gonna make a presentation.
Yeah.
But somebody should speak on behalf of the city. Of what our plan is. We're hiring.
I'll talk to Cascadia and see if that's going to be a part of what they'll say.
City's meeting, and so the mayor or somebody should.
It is and it isn't. I mean, in our contract with them, our job is to host this one. Their job is to sort of provide the content. I'm not saying that that's not a good idea, but it's not a time for us to do a bunch of back and forth. I do think an opening statement.
Our neighbors should know that we are in control. We're not being.
Yeah. And so either an opening statement or an opening statement before the questions and answers, I think is a fine idea.
Someone, yeah.
Agenda. at the meeting of
Um,
Cascadia Partners?
they would
It's actually coming out on the 23rd.
There you go.
They're
And
going,
we'll get a copy of it.
and
ahead
we
of
will
time?
we will all have a copy of that.
I will help me remember.
It will include all their slides and the information that they're going to be presenting and everything. So that we'll have a really clear outline of what's going on. But I thought this was kind of an important thing to talk about where we're going
Well,
and
knowing that, then we can encourage people who maybe are in favor of this process to come as well as folks that maybe aren't in favor of it. So we can both.
They need to hear the content. Somebody
What
needs
about them?
to give the whole, like, what are we doing here? Framework. Cascadia's pretty good at that.
They are good at it. and-
they're excellent.
You know, and I think mostly what I want people to know is that this is not, it's not a done deal. I hate to say it, but it may be that this is something Yahats decides not to do at this time. And I don't
I
really
don't
have
know
a,
why we would decide not to do it.
I don't either, but that's me personally.
Things as well too.
And I've had some people who are pretty outspoken and feel very strongly in opposition to the idea.
For what reason?
Density scares them. They're concerned about parking and noise and all these things that, you know, they're picturing something, I guess, very different than what I'm picturing, a quiet little cottage in my backyard or an internal conversion.
So hopefully.
Somebody to mow my lawn when I get old.
knows what these things are so that they're prepared for those kind of.
Reasonable.
This is round 3 with them, and we ruled out a lot of things that weren't really Yahat's flavor. Because they presented initially the whole gamut. Here are all the things that could be done. And one of the ones that I balked at immediately was the idea of requiring people to build to the density that their zoning allowed. So you buy an R3 lot to build your single-family residence for retirement. I come along and say, hey, that's nice, but you got to build 2 more units because you're on an R3 lot. I said, that's not going to go over big. Because we haven't ever drawn any distinction between, people don't even know what residential zone they're
We
within.
should have conversations on them instead of just not even.
Oh, it's not our first pass. That is maybe an extreme case, and that's an economic hardship. If I suddenly had to build 3 dwelling units instead of 1, I probably wouldn't move here. I mean, that has huge consequences versus saying to people, you may do this thing if you choose to, under these conditions. So we sort of said, let's start with the things that are more palatable, that kind of fit the flavor. The state is forcing this on a lot of communities because of our size. They haven't mandated that we do any of this. I hope that majority of people recognize we need to do something.
Right.
And this is probably one of the easier things for us to manage.
Is it just ADUs? Is that the only?
That's the
discussion
only
point?
thing that we will be addressing.
that's the primary discussion point.
For this, but we are still have the whole slew of things on
Yeah.
the
So,
table, right?
so they have identified, so we identified out of all the code concepts. So there's 2 different things Cascadia is doing for us. One, we have a lot of places where our code is no longer in compliance with state law. And those are non-negotiable. We got to fix it. They're going to kind of take care of that. Say, here's what you have to change about.
Yeah, like manufactured housing
Manufactured housing.
for the family, you know.
So that they're kind of working on that. They will present to us and say, this is what the state says you have to do. And we look at it and say, yep, I got
Perfect.
to it.
Good,
But then of these, all the code concepts, the things that are optional for us.
yeah,
ADUs were the thing that was identified as the first one we wanted to attack.
right,
It doesn't mean that we may not still get to something else on
Right.
this contract with them. I applied for a grant, basically the same grant that we've now done 3 times with them through DLCD for the 2025-26 legislative session. Typically, we don't get it, but this time hardly anybody applied. So we may get lucky and just be able to continue our work with them.
how much is that grant for?
We don't
Oh,
They don't even really know because we choose to have them, we could take
Right.
the money, but then we would have to
right,
oversee the Cascadia thing, and frankly,
Right.
I don't want that job. So far,
Right.
it's worked really well to have them slug it out.
yeah,
But what I heard sort of through the grapevine was that they had I kind of guessed at it because I was getting reminders twice a day saying the deadline is next, I mean, up until like 2 hours before the deadline, they were urging people to apply. So fingers crossed that we actually get that money and then we can just keep rolling.
So ADUs only. Okay.
No, it's,
But I think they'll probably touch on, and we'll know when we see.
Oh,
So
okay.
this is really geared towards people who haven't participated in this conversation at all. So they're gonna be people who say, what's middle housing? It doesn't mean anything to them. So they may do sort of, I would imagine they'll lay out kind of the big picture.
Right.
and then focus in on the ADUs and say, this is what we're concentrating on now.
Yeah.
They're also planning on having an online, opinion poll
Oh,
that
okay.
they'll put in for people
Survey or
that,
something.
yeah.
Speaking, yeah, so
addition.
with Neil's help, I'm gonna just get us set up so we have kind of one-stop place on the city website. All of the stuff they've done is in there under a planning tab, but maybe in anticipation of this meeting or immediately following, we'll get the survey, their slideshow from that, and the final products from our other projects with them. So if somebody really does want to get up to speed, because I'm hoping some people walk out of the meeting saying, I don't really know as much about this as I thought I did.
Mhm.
So I want to make it as easy as possible for those people to.
Because it seems like there could be a whole gamut just with ADUs. I mean, there's the existing ADUs that are not currently authorized, but they're grandfathered in. Maybe, the least thing we could do is grandfather in what's already existing.
Well, so I'm kind
Well,
of picturing an
no.
amnesty
Yeah.
period, because my concern with those is
It would be nice.
not up to code.
So
So have the state fire marshal come and take a look and make sure your egress from bedrooms is all cool. Let's get the thing permitted. Offer people the opportunity to make it legit, because that is my big concern. And I'm seeing people submitting permit applications now for, I just want to dress up the shed over here and I'm like, yeah, you're gonna put a bathroom and I know what's happening.
Well, I know that there's a lot that are out there because I bought a house that had it and I had no clue if it was permitted or
Yeah.
not, but it was.
So that would be one. So there's some that are grandfathered in, but still may not be to code. And people don't really even know. And that is a
But-
problem, even with the internal.
Just because you have, I mean, I don't even know myself if, when is it an ADU? And when is it not? When you got the stove?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well, I
So
don't
if you
know.
have a second kitchen,
mind.
it becomes a second dwelling unit.
Yeah.
So you could have,
I did.
you can have a man cave in the backyard that has a wet bar and a bathroom.
Right. Yeah.
And then you plug the air fryer in and you're pretty much good to go.
Right.
But technically that's not.
Well, I don't think many people actually buy stoves for those units anymore because the induction.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. You don't really, I haven't turned mine on.
I'm.
That's another story. So, but, yeah, I could live quite a long time without turning my stove on.
Yeah.
But really my big concern is, is there proper egress?
Mhm.
Because we're seeing this all over the state where people are doing attic or garage conversions. And maybe it's well intended, but you don't have a way to get out.
But
And
it's only if they're going to rent it out to somebody else.
technically it's still an ADU, even if it's empty.
If you have a stove. It's just so crazy.
But
It doesn't make sense.
So I could rent a room in my house to somebody unrelated to me. With or without kitchen privileges. It's kind of nobody's business but mine.
Which wouldn't be an
It
ADU.
wouldn't be an ADU. But you'd
I'm
still hope
hoping
though that it was to
we
code for a
discuss-
sleeping area, that I'm not sticking somebody in the attic with a window.
That's one of the things why we're having this discussion today is to kind of make it a little clearer for us so that when somebody comes up and says, well, is it an ADU if I don't have a stove? Or is it an ADU because I'm sure we're going to get people that have purchased a home that has
Yeah.
something like that in it. And now they're looking at it and going, ooh.
Right. What is
What
it
have
that
I
I
got?
have? Yeah, because I think of my space as a separate space for guests,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't have a stove.
Yeah.
And it was there.
I'm not gonna bust you.
I don't know.
But really, you know, so we have some that are legitimately grandfathered in, like they predate adoption of our current code, early nineties.
But we
And
don't
we have
even
a-
know when those, we don't know how many we have.
Yeah, I could hazard a pretty good
So
guess.
when we do a survey, I'd really like to ask people if they could anonymously state whether they have, maybe it's not called an ADU, but a separate space. It would be nice to know. I don't know
Well,
why.
and I just think if we can make it as easy as possible for people to make those spaces as safe as possible,
Yeah,
and then we've accomplished something, even if we don't go
True.
any further with that. But anyway, we digress. I guess.
Digress, yes. So we're talking about how to talk to people about, you know, what's legitimate to have us speak to what's going on. And we can have a conversation at the post office with somebody about ADUs without violating
after
anything
the
because
23rd, and I get the information, so I know what I'm talking about.
There you go.
Because I still am confused.
In the meantime, you can talk about the public hearing protocol. I did 15 years on the planning commission, and I can honestly say there was only one time I walked into a public hearing where I really felt like I'd made my mind up before the hearing. I might have been leaning one direction or another, but that's the part I kind of want people to understand, that we're starting the public input portion. And if we hear a bunch of stuff that we're not expecting to hear, or because some of it sounds and feels sometimes like the public thinks a group of 5 to 7 people are going to decide this thing without any consideration for how the rest of the community feels, and that's not the case. I know you guys better than that. You know, and you may have personal feelings about how this should go, but I want people to feel like it's worth showing up for the public meetings or writing a letter or whatever, however they choose to express themselves. It's nice if they don't yell at us, but some of that might happen too. And so you can sort of focus on the opportunity for public input, because we'll make sure there's plenty of that.
So is somebody going to go back to Cascadia Partners and ask them, I would like to request that they provide the information on what an ADU is, so that I can say to somebody, do you have to rent it? There's a lot in the community, and that's the confusing part that I hear. What exactly are we talking about? That they have to build it? It's already there? Does it have to have a stove? And it doesn't make sense to me that it doesn't have to have a stove in it.
Well, by our definition, it does, because the D is for dwelling, and we define a dwelling as a place with a sleeping area, kitchen, and sanitary facilities.
Okay, so
So-
if we state that, then I want Cascadia to say to the public, if you have a place and you're gonna build a place without a stove, you can rent it and it's not called an ADU. So why you
Well, I
bother?
don't know that I want them to get into that, because that's sort of peculiar to our own code. I think they'll do a good job, because almost the entire state has adopted this now.
They've adopted ADU. So if we
Right,
don't
correct.
adopt an ADU, people can still build a unit as long as they don't do a stove and rent it. So it's.
well, no, you got to stop right there
Okay.
because according to our code now, you can't do that.
Can't do what?
You can't
You
have an
could- You could
ADU.
build
You can't have an ADU, correct?
Right.
If you're saying an ADU includes a stove, but somebody can build a unit without a stove.
well, they can't build
No, they can't-
detached one in
can't-
one zone. I
They
can't,
build in
a detached,
A
no.
detached unit.
they can do their.
So I could do
They could
I could do what's
remove.
called an internal conversion.
No,
I could remodel my home now with the idea that it would be sort of a separate space, whether it was for
They
guests
can
or for
put-
renting. So maybe it has a separate entrance.
Yeah.
You know, there's some sound protection between, I can't put that second kitchen in legally.
Right, no, you can't put in a stove. You can't put
Right.
A
Well, the
refrigerator.
county's even cracking down on that now. They've called out a couple of our local.
That's what I'm asking for, is that clarification right there.
Who's cracking down?
I challenge the county on this because we don't have such a thing, but people are sort of starting to plan for this possibility. I had a building permit application where they were putting a stove in a family or a sink in, there's a wet bar and a family room. And the guy at the county said that the depth of that sink, that's a kitchen sink. And I'm.
This is in your odds?
Yeah. And I said, look, I don't call those, okay, and there's a 30-inch gap in the countertop that's gonna be a stove someday, as long as it's not there now. So they're really getting kind of
So our regulations,
our regulation.
county people, if we,
Yeah, they don't,
so we say it's none of your business, county, because.
pretty much, and they don't hear it, but I say it a lot.
Okay,
So their job is to review our permits for compliance with International Building Code or whatever specialty code applies. We review it for the Yahats Municipal Code.
but this is an example you gave, they're scrutinizing the kind of sink. So that, I didn't even know anybody was doing that.
I didn't either. I was surprised when I got the phone call and I basically said, interesting, I didn't catch that, but I don't care. I would care if it shows a second stove, or a third. Let's not stop at 2 units. But hopefully your questions about what is and is not an ADU will be answered. This is partly why I don't want Cascadia to get too much into our local interpretation, because it is our local interpretation. And we make a big deal about that kitchen. That's what triggers the designation of a second dwelling. So an addition with a room and a bath and a separate entrance that I use for whatever purposes.
So we're talking about a new regulation that will let people put a small structure in their backyard.
Or
Or,
modify the existing four walls of their house. Yeah.
But the new thing, I mean, already they can put it in their house. They can already have it.
Not with that second kitchen in the R1
Kitchen
zone.
and everything else,
Not the stove.
but you could have a countertop with a plug.
Yeah, and I've seen it where literally you can tell, that's the intent.
yeah,
But, okay, so a new thing that would be enabled would be a structure in the backyard separate from the house.
That would be a huge change.
That we
Yeah.
would now allow
Yep.
explicitly.
And which may then require, boy, I wish I had a way of digitizing everything in my file cabinets but if I had to hazard a guess, in the R1 zone, most people who build are coming right up against that 30% lot coverage.
Hmm.
So I see a lot of applications where they're in the 25 to 28%. They might be able to add a deck or a shed at a later date, but they haven't left enough lot coverage under our current code to add that, even if 600 square foot.
But we did talk about, that was one of the items.
So that's one of the things that you guys will have to discuss is then do we tweak the lot coverage standards? Because they're pretty, 30%, we're saying basically 70% of your lot you can't touch with any structure. That's a lot of open space.
You have some big lots in some parts of town.
Yeah, we have some where, I calculate the lot coverage and it'll come up at like 3.6% because there's some in your neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily all buildable. There's some steep
Right.
slopes but you still get to count it.
So
Yeah. That hillside behind your house, that counts.
that's,
And
we're not building on
yeah.
oh, good.
I'm sure your downstairs neighbors are all relieved, none of them. But yeah, we might want to take a look at that and say, and maybe you tie it to the ADU, that we're not allowing it across the board in the R1 zone. So for each increase from R1 to R4,
Right.
for each one, we add 5% lot coverage. So when you get up to the R4, you've got 45% lot coverage. We have never tied that to the use of that lot.
Mhm.
So we don't say you get 45% lot coverage if you're building multifamily. So you can come in and cover 15% more of the lot for your single family residence just because you got lucky and bought something that was intended for higher density residential.
Yeah.
So that's something I think we could sort of play with and tie it more to the use than the zone.
Good idea.
So those are the kinds of things. And then the other thing is, the CCNRs is a big issue. Because they, in most
They're not gonna
instances,
change, yeah.
don't allow that.
Yeah.
Catherine actually had kind of an interesting idea on that one, and
She went through and basically mapped every subdivision I could think of in town, and there are more than anybody would think. There's some that are 2 or 3 lots here or there. And the developer wanted to make it a community unlike any other, so maybe he imposed some weird deed restrictions. Most people don't even know it, including the people who own those lots. So I sort of mapped all the subdivisions and then pulled the corresponding CCNRs. And a huge number of them, especially the ones from the 50s, 60s, 70s, before we had a municipal code, basically tried to do the job that our code does now. So they include some setbacks, they say things like 1 single family residence per lot. I don't think most people know that those have been in place on their property for 50, 60 years. They all have a mechanism for being revised or overturned.
Can the city override them?
We have no
not
authority.
at this point, no.
Even though there's a state.
Well,
law?
I shouldn't say that. If they are less restrictive than our rules, then they don't apply. If they violate federal or state law when it comes to, we have one here in town with a sundown clause. It says only white folk after sundown.
That's somewhere in the book somewhere.
Ocean Crest.
What?
I'll tell you when yeah. You know my friend Sam, he delights in buying property in those neighborhoods. Anyway, so there's a big disclaimer now. If you get a title report, it says anything that, violates state or federal.
Let's say on the ADU thing, say if they say no ADUs
Correct.
and the city says ADUs are okay.
Then the
think that-
CCNRs,
CCNR overrules the city.
same as if we allow RV parking in your driveway, but Blackstone says you can't do it. So it can be more restrictive as long as it's not violating state law.
Well, that's the thing.
And that may change. The state may say, 1950s CCNRs, you're out. So they could add to the disclaimer
So the
for
state can do that, but not us.
not us. So I can't enforce them. If I have a building permit for a subdivision where there's a height restriction, it's more restrictive than our 30 feet. And somebody submits something that's more than, I'll make a note, but I can't not process that permit. If they want to roll the dice, but it's up to the neighbors. It's a contract between the neighbors who all have the same deed restriction. So those people can come after them, and it's happened. But there are some neighborhoods where I think people would probably say, wow, if we could just go door to door and remove this one line from our CCNRs, and then we could play the ADU game too, I think they'd probably do it. I can't do it for them, but I can sure make it easy for them to do it, because with a couple of keystrokes, I can produce a list of everybody in a particular subdivision, and I'll do it on my own time. So that might be something, I looked at some of these and I kind of thought, who are the movers and shakers in this neighborhood or that neighborhood? Who would I want pounding on the door? At least to make people aware.
But if somebody comes in with wanting to build something, is it up to you to check against their covenants?
No,
No.
they-
So I happen to be aware of them because I am. And so I'll make a note so that they know. We used to have when we would hand out paper packets, there was a big bright
Mhm.
green or orange,
Red.
said, check your deed restrictions.
It was red.
Red, okay, I knew it was eye catching.
Mhm.
But we can't, so somebody in one of these neighborhoods where the CCNR said only one dwelling per lot. If we pass the ADUs, they come in and say, I want to build an ADU, I would have to process it according to the city rules.
But you do have a copy of the restrictions.
Yeah.
They're in the city records.
No,
No,
because they're not city, you can go, Western Title has done a really nice job. If you Google Western Title CCNRs, you can choose Lincoln County, you can put in the name of
Okay.
any subdivision,
So they're public.
and you can pull them up, they're public record, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I have them, but
Right.
the city doesn't have any role in that. And some have been violated over the years. I was thinking about Yahat's Beach Homes, which is huge. It's on the south end of town. Most people again don't know it exists, both sides of the highway, Surfside, Windy Way, up into Crestview, single story only. You drive through that neighborhood and somebody didn't get that memo. Yeah, so usually then there's also a line in there that says in the event that one of these provisions has been violated, all the others still apply. But I don't think there are many or any that I can think of where that single residence per lot has been violated. So that's just gonna be, that's kind of a project I've just been thinking on. So we've got our work to do. You know, and there may be just enough people who decide I'm willing to be the one to test the waters in this subdivision or that subdivision without revising. I don't know that I'd want to be that person. Ocean Crest again comes to mind. It's the neighborhood from Seventh to Marine Drive, everything west of 101. And they have such a thing that, so none of those lots would be allowed to have an ADU under their CCNRs. I don't think the majority of the people in that neighborhood would feel strongly about upholding that. I could be wrong. But it's 170 lots or something in there. That's significant. So we could facilitate that in some way, but I can't, you know, I won't be the one going door to door, but I could encourage others. Probably shouldn't put that on the tape.
I think the other thing that, that we're gonna see a fair interest in is, parking. And, that's gonna be kind of an entertaining,
What are the hotspots there? People, in particular.
I think, well, my street, King Street, for example,
There's
is,
no on-street parking.
there's
There's no
just,
place to park cars.
there's really minimal places to park on it, and
But so
so,
is the issue. I mean, it's just basically saying, don't build anything unless you can park on the street.
yeah, I mean, and kind of the same way with up where you are, there's some areas in there that are gonna be a real challenge to park on. Going up what, 10th Street?
And
10th.
and you don't want to walk home.
I was gonna say, I can see people trying to park on that.
Well, and different communities have done it different ways, and the state has sort of mandated different things. Some communities have decided if this is going to be sort of an owner occupied property, the owner's gonna take care of it. You know, so I have an ADU, I don't have one. If I had one in my backyard, I would have complete control over who I rent to. So maybe I'm not gonna rent a 500 square foot studio apartment to someone with 10 cars. Cause I don't want it in my front yard. So some communities have decided just to let it handle itself. And we do have some things under the nuisance ordinance. We could add some additional ones if we sort of just wanted to let it police itself. Or at this point, we require 2 off-street parking spaces per dwelling unit. So if we kept with that logic, if I add an ADU, I would have to provide 2 more off-street parking spaces. Even though I have 1 car and I might rent to somebody who works at the Whale Tail. But we don't have any case-by-case basis there. It's, and I keep thinking in the R2 zone, how do we distinguish between legitimate second unit, you're allowed to have a duplex. Is there any advantage to it being an ADU? One advantage might be that the parking standard is not as heavy.
Lauren's hand is up.
Yeah, the parking, and I agree that parking is going to be a huge issue. The other thing that we haven't talked about, which is a very realistic guiding principle, might be the fire department. The fire departments require adequate distance to get their trucks and emergency vehicles in, and we haven't even investigated that yet. But I think we're going to have to look at their input into it as well, and primarily because some of our streets are basically one lane wide. So if anybody parks on the street, you can't get an emergency vehicle through.
Do we have laws against parking on those streets?
Technically, we have a 72-hour limit,
Any street park?
but the only time that's enforced is if somebody complained. We recently had somebody reported a van that it was pretty clear somebody was living in and expired tags, and it hadn't moved in a couple of weeks. And so that was as much a welfare check as anything else. But there's some neighborhoods down here, West 2nd, 3rd Street, where people don't have off-street parking and they're parking on the street in front of their house. And I'm not down there chalking tires. If there's no complaint, there's no enforcement. But we don't allow. So if you build a house or you build a duplex, you're required to provide the number of off-street parking spaces that our code says. You're not required to use them.
Right.
And so you can build them and then park on the street if,
For
that's more convenient for you. I have a garage that my car's never met, but technically that would be one of my required parking spaces. So yeah, I don't know how, I think it is going to be something that people are scared of. They're worried about what that's going to look like, particularly in neighborhoods where there's not much or any on-street parking. I have somebody on Memorial Day, 8 o'clock in the morning, started texting me pictures of a car parked on the street that had been there overnight. I'm like, there's no rule against having an overnight guest. And if that person finds a legal spot on the street. So there's kind of that level of concern. Yeah, you tell them so.
Having a nightmare.
So, I mean, that's kind of one of the things that we're looking at. Another one is residential requirement. Is it going to be required that, that whoever owns the initial property is in residence there if they're having an ADU and they're renting the ADU? Or is this going to become something where you have a vacation home and now you have an ADU in the back of it that, you're renting to kind of pay for the vacation home?
And Mary, that's a huge one since 65% of our homes aren't occupied full time.
Right.
So if we say you got to live there year round, that's bigger than the CCNRs.
But we haven't decided to make that. a rule.
No, but these are the kinds of things that I guess.
Oh, but those are the kinds of things that we need to kind of sit there and people are going to ask about.
I mean,
So,
that would be a better use of having some, an ADU person at least using the space all the time. It's better to nobody use it.
Well, and I would like it if I was leaving my house unattended for months and
once
months.
at a time, I mean, have a caretaker there. Why not? I mean, that, not a bad
Yeah.
concept.
Another job in yachts.
And then would that be a person renting the ADU, or would that be a job that we had set up on it? So it's kind
And
of
I guess
interesting.
we don't care.
We don't care, right?
We really don't. We don't care if you're charging for it. We don't care if you're bartering. We don't care if you're just letting somebody live there out of the kindness of your.
Kindness of your heart,
It's not our
yeah.
business any more than, how much I charge for one of my rents.
It's not any more business than the family concept that we have about doing blood work to see if you're really a family member.
So it was 65% number. So How do we know that?
So that came from Cascadia's in the first pass in the buildable lands inventory. And boy, I was super impressed. I think I found one, started to call it a mistake, but then when I thought about it, I thought, well, technically, the cemetery is zoned R1 and could be converted to housing production east of where the bodies are buried. They did a really amazing job on all of their data gathering.
So how do they know who's living in the houses on?
So you can go and look and see where tax bills are going.
Yes. They
Um,
did that. They did that level.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is, and I was surprised by the number. It might have actually been 63, but it was over 60.
Yeah, there was a big number.
And even they expressed some surprise at that and said, you know, that kind of skewed some of their, they said, if that continues to be the trend, that for every housing unit that we need, for those of us who are here, we need to produce 2 more for those of us who are passing through, which kind of changes the whole picture. And who knows, that may or may not hold true. We saw a lot of people during and post-COVID convert their second homes to their first homes because they figured out they could happily live here. So that was part of what grew our population without a huge housing boom, was we just saw people moving in.
Well, the other thing is now the trend is that not to be able to work at a distance. And so
Yeah,
I'm wondering if we're gonna see kind of a transition out again because of the fact that people that were working, you know,
and that's true. A lot of the post-COVID people that I talked to, it was because they were suddenly able to work remotely.
yeah.
So moved from the Bay Area, they could work from here, and that may be shifting back.
So then another thing that's a consideration is the system development charges. And that's an interesting one that, you know, people are going to start asking about. It's, you know, do we do a system development charge on something that is being connected to the sewer and water? And, you know,
Will
if
they
we,
be talking about that?
Yeah, we'll have to make some,
Probably.
Cascadia won't, because these are the things that we get to decide. They may talk about that as an incentive. So it's
as an incentive.
waiving any charge like that is one way to incentivize the ADU. Those charges are currently upwards of $17,000.
Those are real costs to the city.
Well,
If we go to charge for the building.
not really, well, it's money the city doesn't collect. But again, I'll use my ADU in the backyard. I'm one person right now. City gives me 2 units of water free with my bill every month, and I don't consume those 2 units. So if I had another person with similar habits, we're probably still coming in under the typical household usage or at the typical household usage. So it's not adding an additional strain to the city's system. I mean, that's sort of the idea behind the system development charge. You build a new house, you know, you add a new household to the city.
But more water is being used, so we need more capacity in the overall.
Well, if that person's staying with me now and I just move them to the backyard, it's,
You know, more people using more water, so ultimately.
so the good news is we have all kinds of data on consumption. You know, it may be something that we don't have a one size fits all
Sure.
thing for, or a small ADU for an internal conversion. It sort of doesn't make sense, because if I were to take a wing of my house and turn it into a separate apartment, I'd have to replumb to have it separately metered. I mean, it wouldn't make sense. Right now, it would make more sense to run through my existing meter. And
Yeah, but metering and charging, the system development charge could be different.
that's
And it
basically
doesn't make
what,
sense to me that we would authorize having an ADU and incentivizing an ADU by not charging that system and development charge unless we want to have more, nobody living in the homes.
Right?
So I don't see why.
Not
Yeah,
Well, that last,
We have
not paid
to
for it.
build a water supply system for them.
right.
well, so this is something where planning will have a role, but so will Public Works. Cause it's kind of their money and their data, that we're playing with, but it's a huge, if it's 17,000 up front to add one of these units, that could be a make it or break it thing right off the bat. Do I want to pay the 17,000 to do this? And then on top of that, you have now a second base rate every month. So you've got another $115 a month that you're gonna be paying.
There is an argument that, low cost housing is more cheaply done in Wallport than in Nautilus, in water as an example. The minimum water bill in Wallport is a lot less than the minimum water bill in Nautilus.
We just compiled a bunch I didn't think Walport was that much different. The county is, for sure.
Yeah, the counties are
I like that.
very
It
different.
could be Southwest Lincoln, but they also don't provide sewer. Whereas ours
There's
is
that
all
sewer
rolled in together and we
Yeah.
don't meter the outgoing. We just say incoming pretty much equals outgoing.
But the main point I was gonna make is just, whatever we charge for all those things should be sustainable cost of providing those things.
Right.
And if it costs more here, that's too bad, but, we're not gonna subsidize people.
And you can probably imagine the public outcry when the base rate went into effect. We didn't always have that.
Right.
It used to be strictly, you paid for metered consumption. So with 60+% of our
That's
homes.
a defensible model because you're paying for infrastructure and that's a larger investment that.
Well, and the city couldn't borrow any money because you'd
Yeah.
go to, one of these agencies that lends for things like a upgrade to our wastewater treatment plant, and they say, well, look, in the month of January, you guys make $25 on selling your water. Not a good credit risk. So having the base rate, but the people who say, I don't even turn my faucet on 8 months out of the year, they were outraged. One of the things we could look at that, well, Newport does this, they have more than one rate for system development charges. So if you're building a new home, they have, last time I looked, 3 tiers based on the square footage. So if I'm building a 1,250 square foot home, I pay one rate, guy building 3,000 pays another. So they're still collecting the money, so we could look at offsetting if there is some incentive given through system development charges. The guy with the 4,000 square foot house and 5 bathrooms is kind of suggesting he's gonna use more water than I am. But there's some creative things we could do, and this is where we would involve the public works folks, the folks who do the utility billing and see the numbers.
I'd really much prefer to see that if someone's going to, if there was a way for us to say, if you're if you're putting your housing, your ADU into low income housing, it's gonna be rented to a low income housing person under the whatever threshold it is, that we would help make that happen. But if it's gonna be left open, if it's gonna be a vacation rental, if it's gonna be whatever, no, I don't know.
So this is where I'll get back to where we started with this, with the working on your elevator speech. Those are the kinds of things that I don't want to hear at the post office. What I want to hear is there is a whole range of options on the
That's
table.
actually what I just said, that
Okay.
it's a whole range.
So we're gonna have to choose.
Instead of just one, which is what you just said, was that if we were to tell people that there would not, that system development charge would be that same cost it is now, that there would be an uproar about that. But I think there's a whole.
No, I was referring to when we,
But I could have misunderstood what you
So
said.
this is an area where we're gonna make choices of what we're gonna do,
I don't think so. We're not gonna make any choices at this meeting.
not at this meeting.
Oh, eventually.
In
And
the, we're gonna
hopefully
write
this
regulation.
whole gamut of what are all the options that we can
And
have.
those are real policy decisions that either incentivize or disincentivize second homes, et cetera, et cetera.
Ah.
So that's got some substance to it.
Right.
Those are real issues.
And where I hope people do some thinking and some studying on it and really understand what the consequences are of one choice over another.
And you know, one of the things that's gonna come up is how will it affect my taxes? And I mean, that's another issue. And the point of it is that we have absolutely no control
Nothing to do with that, yeah.
and we have nothing to do with that
That
and
would increase your taxes if you built another place.
Potentially.
This is the,
Yeah, I mean, logically.
I've got a builder who could make that not be the
That
case.
could be not the case, but for the most part, you would think logically that if your property value goes up, your taxes goes
but
up.
that's under the control of the assessor that has nothing to do with this.
Correct, and we don't
yeah.
Nothing.
collect that money, so it really doesn't.
Collect a tiny bit.
And we really don't,
Well, and if it's
Much.
in the urban renewal district, we collect a tiny bit more, so. That's another thing that maybe a lot of people don't think about, but those properties that are in our urban renewal district. New improvements there, the city gets the lion's share.
I thought Bob did a really good job at the meeting that was held on the finances of discussing that.
yeah.
I thought that was really good for
And,
those that attended.
that was a good discussion and, that's something to keep in mind that those kinds of discussions like that are you pay attention to what somebody's saying, you don't necessarily argue with them, but you collect the data that, that they're saying and we move forward with some things, that they may bring up something very interesting and unique that we hadn't thought of on that, but just,
It was just on the budget, on the yearly budget in July, I
Yeah,
think, or something.
that was correct, yeah. Okay, well, we're at the end of our fun time.
Oh,
The
great.
work session is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and we got a couple of minutes to
Next.
take a dog for a walk.
So we start at 3.
Yeah, technically.
Wrappers.
Off here,
We don't.
you're on.
And calling the regular planning commission meeting to order. It's September 16th, 2025. And in attendance are Greg Hogan, Lauren Dickerson, Jolene Goslin, our planning commissioner, our planning, our city planner, sorry. Catherine Gunther, and we've got Kimmy Johnson is the recorder. Amendments
And
correspondence,
Yes, everyone.
we have nothing.
we have nothing, okay. Do we have any citizens' concerns? They're limited to items not on the agenda and with a 5-minute limit per person.
After, we won't start the clock till you return the dog. I would just be wrong.
You want to come up front?
I'll be here too.
So if you could state your name and address, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is George Giroux, and I live at 215 Crestview in Yachats. I'm addressing the commission today because of a adjacent property that we bought. It's on Green Hill, and it's an R2 property. And when we bought it, there was a very tire double wide on it, which we had to haul away. So we basically have a vacant lot with a big pole barn on it. We've been trying to figure out how to develop it. We like the idea of putting in a duplex between that yachts and housing. Very quickly, we ran into the reality of building costs on the Oregon coast. We've got quotes close to 400 square foot, which is daunting. And so I've been following the Cascadia Partners recommendations, the process. I've read their entire report from back in 23, I think it was. And so I saw the draft recommendations that were presented the other day and are on the meeting things. And I wanted to address something that's in the R1 and R2 in particular. And I would like commission to maybe talk about why you've got 1,000 square foot minimum listed in the R1 and R2. I don't.
Is that for manufactured?
No, that has been removed. It used to be.
Yeah.
For
Right.
manufactured, but now they've gotten rid of any distinction. But
I'm not
there's-
sure where you're referring to.
Okay, so if you want to look at page 5 of the draft document.
Oh, so this is in Cascadia's materials, not, I thought you were saying our code had that. I was like,
Draft suggested amendments for consideration by Yachats Planning Commission is the document I'm looking at. And it says here, the dwelling shall have a minimum horizontal dimension of 24 feet and enclosed a space of not less than 1,000 square feet. And so I want to show you a couple pictures of some, one is a manufactured home that we considered. Another one is a log a structure that is a prefabricated kit. So here's the log structure. Good looking home, if you ask me.
So what's the per square foot cost of these?
Well, by the time it's all said and done, probably not a whole lot less. Maybe knock off 50 or 60 square. Because you still need to put.
kitchens and bathrooms get you when you reduce.
I'm not sure. Lauren, did you see that?
Lauren, did you get the email I sent to you? I sent these two images in an email to you. Were you able to?
No, I have not seen any emails. When did you send it?
So I don't know how to show you.
The cameras are there.
But it kind of doesn't matter. Here's one of them that I showed you.
Footage of this.
So let me continue. So in our situation, we were gonna get 2 of these units. And this garage would become a shared entryway where you'd enter that and then go to one unit or the next. And so it wouldn't have a garage door, obviously. To pull it off, because our site, even though it's a big lot, has some constrained building envelope, we were gonna eliminate one of these sections. So it would be like this section, and this middle section in between. That came in at about 900 square feet. So we would find ourselves in front of you guys asking for a variance if you went forward with your draft code. And I'm kind of wondering, why would I do that? And if I did do that, what criteria would we have to meet to get the?
I'm not familiar with the document you're referring to. We have no pending draft code that would impose a square footage.
Right there, number one.
So this has been adopted. This is interesting because oh. Okay, yeah.
These are the draft recommendations that were put together by the interim.
Yes, and what he was trying to do was address the problem of manufactured
Yes.
homes and discriminating against manufactured homes by discriminating equally against site built.
Yes.
And we're not going that way. That was not
So-
the intent.
Here's another.
So those are not on the table.
No, they are not.
Things we're not going to do.
It was a Dan Fleischman
Oh.
recommendation.
Recommendation.
So here's another example. This is a single wide manufactured in Oregon and would have suited our needs perfectly.
Uh-huh.
This comes in at about 700 square feet because our lot, like many in Yachats, is at the end of a steep, narrow drive, and the manufactured home people came out and said, you're limited to 48 feet. That's all we can bring up here. So if you have a 14-foot-7-inch wide, single wide at 48 feet, it comes in at about 700 square feet. So I was just here asking that you scrap the minimum.
Consider it done.
It doesn't.
It never got off the ground.
Never, yeah.
Good.
And that's one of the things that Cascadia is gonna do for us. So there was apparently some confusion
Yeah,
in my absence. That was being handled already by removing the discriminatory language against the manufactured homes.
yeah.
Right now, we say you can't have a single wide,
Right.
even if it's a nicely done,
Yeah.
like some of these things by Idea Box and stuff.
Yeah,
They don't look like an old single wide. They're
No.
pretty cool. But we say it has to be multi-sectional. We
Yeah.
can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
So the idea was not to make it equally difficult for site built, but it was to remove those kinds of things. And somehow that draft came out of
okay,
a misguided attempt to
Yeah.
address that problem.
well, great.
So consider this your variance hearing.
No minimum square footage for a house,
We do not have,
250 square feet
Correct.
on a R1.
we do not have a minimum. It has to contain all the things that a dwelling has to contain. So if you can have a sleeping area and a bathroom and a
And a kitchen.
kitchen.
Doesn't
Yeah,
matter the size.
And two parking places.
and two parking spaces. We actually had a situation where the proposed residence was fewer square feet than the required parking.
Although not yet.
We had two 9x18 parking spaces and the residence was like 200 square. So if you need to stretch your legs, go outside.
But Catherine, at this point, the code does not allow what he's showing. It's
It does.
manufactured.
It does.
It does.
Oh, we allowed
Well,
manufactured.
we can't-
housing?
We can't enforce that because it's illegal.
Because it's the state says
Okay.
no.
Just haven't-
Changed.
we haven't changed our code. But the state has said if you still have that, and most small towns do because we all started with the same draft code.
But we plan to change it. It's still on.
Cascadia will come to us with that.
But we are.
Yes, it's on the books, but.
Yeah, so we can't say no to a single wide. We can't,
So hopefully we'll get that changed on the books soon so that.
that's part of what Cascadia will do for us.
That's part of, yeah, that is actually a big part of the Cascadia piece is correcting the ones where the state says you can't have this.
Very good.
But in the meantime, I just can't, poor Neil, at one point, somebody called with a question about it and he dutifully sent them the link to the code. And I said, that's all well and good, but guess what? It's not enforceable. Call them back and say, never mind. Because it still looks legit.
I'm not 100% sure of this, but I think the International Building Code which I think Lincoln County leans on, it does have minimums for kitchens and bathroom, minimum square footage for a kitchen and for a bathroom.
And now there's these multiple specialty small codes.
So I see.
So I think there may be, like you fall under the International Building Code if all of those things are larger than, but then you get into the small home specialty code, and then there's the thing for the tiny homes, it's even smaller. There's no one size fits all, and
Well, I'm very relieved to see that that's gone, our options are opened up again.
We have a happy residents.
Yes, and.
you put something on the reader board quick before you get it.
Taking this way.
I did find the discussion of the ADU very interesting, but there was a single mention of a tiny home as an option, and I don't think we're gonna be asking, they're already asking.
So that is an option.
Yes,
And a tiny home, a tiny home right now can be classified in one of three ways, depending on how and if it's affixed to the land. So if it's on wheels and you're gonna pick it up and go somewhere in 3 months, it's an RV. But the state is now saying you can't discriminate against RVs either as a place to live. So a lot of our RV code is also unenforceable. If it's still got the wheels, but it's sort of parked with a more permanent thing, then it falls under one category. If it's on a permanent foundation, it's a house.
And is that current code in your house?
Well, because we don't specify one way or the other, it was the state and the county. The county was slow to recognize any of it. I was hoping when that Tranquility Village went in and they sort of punted on that, those are all RVs. So they sort of avoided the problem, but now the state has said these are the three different ways these things are classified. So if it's a permanent dwelling, we treat it like any other dwelling. And since we don't have a minimum square footage, I would not deny one.
So
The only
it could
ones we
be-
have are Drew Oslin's at the
It could be
fireside.
your primary. dwelling
Absolutely.
Property. Current-
Take it off of wheels.
Take it off the wheels.
Actually, I shouldn't even say that. It might be that under the current, so we have a lot of anti-RV code
Yeah.
that's no longer enforceable.
Do you know where I would go to see the code that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think where the best,
hit you
I'll try to
with-
remember to send you a
I'll
link
hit
to,
an email.
because I'm trying to sort of stay on top of some of that. And our code actually defines an RV park, and then we never mention it anywhere in the code. So we have a definition. We know what it is, we just don't know where you can do it. But now the state says we have to allow them in any zone, and we can't set a minimum, I believe it's less than 1 acre. So basically, if you wanted to have, you could have your own RV park up there.
Oh, boy.
I didn't steal that. Yeah, we'll talk.
thank you.
Thank you for drawing my attention to that. I will make sure it says draft.
And George, I did see your emails here. I was too busy studying the housing study paperwork, so my apologies.
No problem.
Okay. Our next order is ongoing business. Do we have anything on that agenda? New business would be the commission's chair meeting report. And Mark sent me that information, and essentially it was talking about the library, and that's getting completed with, interestingly enough, the front desk has been done, I guess, and they've got the setup where they're starting to put in shelves and do that information. So it's going quickly there. It's being developed rapidly. The cones are being set up for the markers along the walkway that have been run over, there's been funding for that. The budget committee has said that what they are is, they're slightly under budget at this point. As they're going through, let's see, what else was there? That was about it as far as, the meeting was concerned on that. Then we've got the planner's report.
Yeah, I was really hoping to get an activity report in there because it's been quite a few months since I've done one, but I promise you one coming up shortly. We've sort of had steady amount of activity. Despite that $400 a square foot and up cost, people are still building. Some good news on the local wetlands inventory front, and Bobby's not here. She's been hounding me on this. Like, we've sort of moved past a sticking point. There's a draft that was reviewed by Department of State Lands that is back in Pacific Habitat's hands for what I think will be the last round of revisions. So I think we're closer than we have been in a very long time to having our draft accepted by the state. When that happens, things will get kind of fun for us. Pacific Habitat will come out and host a sort of great unveiling of that. I'm seeing that as an opportunity to either educate people or remind people about how we use that inventory, what we can and cannot do. Sort of some misconceptions about what it means to be tagged as a wetland. There may be some things that are sort of upgraded to more significant wetland where we may have a little more say. I'm not seeing that happen yet. At this point, I think it'll still continue to be something that we sort of kick over to the state to let them do their thing. One of the notes I made in my review, though, was that we might want to look at our section of code that was revised when we thought we had adopted the wetlands inventory back in 2012. That's under our coastal shoreline setback section of the code. So I've just made a note that we might want to look at that when we get the new inventory and just make sure that there aren't any conflicts. For example, we sort of relegated Agency Creek to a drainage ditch in our code. We said, yeah, it's a named stream, but it's been so abused over the years that we're going to treat it as a drainage ditch. But I think we're going to see some things in the wetlands inventory that says it warrants a little more protection than that. So under my notes to self in my comments on that was one of the things that I thought I'd bring back to you guys when the time comes.
So this will have recommendations about like natural ecosystems within the city boundaries that you
So it
added.
does. I mean, it's 150 plus pages long. And in fact, I've been playing some email back and forth with Jevra Brown, who's our regional person at Department of State Lands. I may ask her if I can post the draft. They're so paranoid about it's not, you can't use that as a planning tool. And I'm like, yeah, but I peek at it all the time. And one of the things that
But we will, right? I mean,
we will when it's been formally adopted.
because I don't remember seeing anything like this.
So right now, what I have to use is statewide wetlands inventory. So years ago, when people first became aware of wetlands having some value, there was a national inventory. So it was sort of a shot taken from 30,000 feet. And then each state adopted their statewide inventory, and it was a slightly better, more detailed plan. And then it was like, no, everybody needs a local inventory.
And it's not just wetlands, it's like Agency Creek, it's not a wetland, it's a creek, right?
So
So
any waterways, yeah. So streams, it's an interesting document. You can go on now and look at
it's a lot of streams.
there are very few named streams. Some of them are more protected than Agency Creek is
And
because they have adjacent wetlands.
This report will have all of that in it. It'll,
So the part we will use the most are the maps.
yeah, fine.
And there are different rules. I'll lose a little bit of flexibility. Now, the older the inventory and the more distant, so if I were still using the national inventory, I could basically say almost everything might be adjacent because this picture's so bad. When you get to statewide, the interpretation of adjacent or abutting is pretty broad because they acknowledge that it's kind of vague. One of the things that I'm pushing for with our local inventory, when you look at the maps, there's some places where it's like, this wetland runs right up to the property line and then ends in a perfectly straight line. Well, it does because they weren't able to do the site work on the adjacent lot. So I've asked them to flag those, so that I'll sort of have three types of properties. I'll have the ones that have been investigated and there was nothing to see. I'll have the ones that have known wetlands, and I'll have the ones where we don't know. And on the we don't know ones, then I still have the ability to file the wetlands land use notification with the state and say, gee, I really don't think this wetland ends right at the survey line here. So if somebody's proposing development, they will have to do a site-specific investigation.
So any kind of construction that impacts.
Any development, and development is defined very specifically. Somebody cut a driveway in what was on my map, that is development. If you're moving, if you're moving
So
dirt,
this is gonna be more intrusive than it's been.
it'll be more precise.
Yeah.
Because right now, and this is, and I kind of look, I'm looking at the statewide one, but then I also know what the local one says. So if there's something on the local one then I'm able to kind of say, this is adjacent to a wetland because the statewide one's not very specific. So I don't think we've had too many that have gotten away from us. And one of the things that's really changed since 2011, I remember going to the great unveiling then, and there were some property owners who were really upset that their property was being devalued by these people who came poking around. And I don't get that sense at all anymore. I actually had somebody tell me recently when I explained how the whole process worked and that they could pay into a mitigation fund and buy their way out of the problem. The property owner said, I don't want to do that. If it's a wetlands, I don't want to destroy it. And I was shocked that where it used to be, I'm gonna bring the bulldozer in under cover of darkness and hope I don't get caught. And now somebody's saying, I don't even want to do it the legitimate way. So I think we're gonna see a lot more cooperation. So when we get this map, I think we're gonna see some large parcels that were either where there was no attempt made to investigate or they were denied access. And then that'll sort of be the next round. Some are more remote than others, but there's some that are pretty much right here in the city limits. One that's mentioned specifically in the latest review is on Hanley.
Yeah, there's a.
Yeah.
Yep. Where they were unable to gain access or they had no data, is what they were saying, from 2011. So if those get flagged, then that might be where we go next. We get our local inventory adopted, and then we start seeing if there really is enough of a change in attitude that people are willing to have these properties mapped sort of proactively. And the state loves when people ask, so there's a lot you can do for no cost. That they will basically do a wetlands determination for free, which is not as detailed as a delineation, but where they look at their records and sometimes make a site visit and say, based on everything we know about wetlands, there is or is not reason for further investigation. So we may make that part of our sort of public outreach on those ones that are flagged undetermined. But after 14 years, we're in the home stretch. I shouldn't say that. I don't want to jinx us.
The home stretch.
So that's my big news. Oh, and tomorrow council will be adopting or having their second vote on the FEMA model code.
Hmm.
That, we sort of kicked around many months ago. I'm not entirely sure what that's gonna look like, but I'm about to get an education because we have one building application in the pipeline from somebody in a special flood hazard area, so.
Down in Quietwater? or-
Yeah. For an addition, a small addition that, and that's kind of been in limbo until but it's gonna be in a new kind of limbo, I think.
Not the addition that came before us, is it?
Yes.
Oh,
Which is partly why I asked you guys to give it a little longer than the normal 1 year, because I don't know if anybody's
Right.
gonna be able to get a permit through this model code process. It's really unclear, but that guy was willing to be my guinea pig, so stand by.
There any other issues or anything that's going on? What we need to do is, in November, the city, council and city administration is gonna be asking for a list of our goals for the next year. And so that might be something that we look at for the next work session.
Technically, the charter says you guys don't have to produce them till January, but if you don't want to fight, I'd just give them to them in November.
yes. We'll get it over with so we don't have to think about it during the holidays. How about that? I like it.
Okay, and then again, our public meeting with Cascadia is coming up
The 30th,
on the 30th. And
hopefully you'll see lots of publicity for that coming.
That'd be good.
it's 5:30 is
Yep.
the time to 7, and
Food. I'm looking at these guys. Just remember the time, Neil, there was an accident on 101 and the road was closed and he was stuck on the other side with pizza for the. It's like, I'm not worried about Neil. He's coming home with 20 pizzas.
Yeah.
Jimmy was stuck on this side. I think I put you up at the Adobe, but he had all the food.
Yeah.
Stand this up.
Lauren's hand.
well, any other business, Lawrence?
He may have just.
Yeah, the only other thing is the invasive plant ordinance, and I
Oh, yeah.
continue to work on that. And when Mark returns and Catherine can sit down and figure out, when we'll be working on it. It's been pegged as being somewhat important by the mayor, but we're coming up on a lot of things on our plates here, so we'll just have to work on it when we can schedule it in. I'm still doing a bit of research on it and may have something for the rest of the commission, maybe as early as the next session.
Great, good, thank you. Okay,
And the next meeting, we're gonna introduce Steve Chase, is that the plan?
Yes, we have 2 applicants.
Good.
And there's they have the honor of meeting with the city manager before they come to interview with you. And Bobby's doing that with all the commissions now, just to sort of make sure people are aware of what they're signing on to. And particularly important with the planning commission, since attendance is a little more critical for us and there's a little more homework maybe. So she was unable to meet with the second applicant, and then Mary had suggested that we wait until Mark is back, so we'll
Good idea.
hear from both of those folks after they're in October.
great,
Great.
And anybody else who comes along.
But we need,
I thought Gio was going to, but he couldn't get out of here fast enough when we were done with it.
okay, well, I think that does it. Okay,
I'd say,
meeting adjourned. Thank you.
bye, Lauren. Tell me about weeds.
I'm still trying to corral Wally to give me a
Wally
little
is the
hand on
weed guy.
some of the definitions of the plants.
Wally is
I was walking behind Wally one day when, I don't remember what he spotted, but my God, I've never seen.
He knows them, but between he and Mayor Birdie, they're knowledgeable much more so than I am. So I'm just compiling.
There you go.
Okay, well, take care all.
Thank you for coming.
You're doing okay, Lauren?
No,
You're
that's
good?
why I'm on Zoom today. I'm having a lot of trouble getting around.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully